Welcome to This Explainer. I gotta tell you, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are diving headfirst into one of history's most radical, mind-bending personal transformations. We are looking at the life, the legacy, and the truly global impact of St. Francis of Assisi. And look, this isn't just a dry history lesson. It is a profound look at absolute human conviction.
So, the big question we're tackling on our historical pilgrimage today is this. How on earth does a young guy, born with every conceivable advantage, deliberately choose a life of absolute destitution? I mean, what drives someone to look at a life of total luxury and say, no thanks, I want the exact opposite? That incredible wild pivot is the heartbeat of everything we're going to break down today.
And just to really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of his impact, we have to look at what other heavy hitters said about him. Even Dante Alighieri, literally one of the most legendary writers in human history, recognized Francis's world-changing influence. He described him as a light that shone upon the world. We are talking about a figure who, in just a few short decades, managed to shift the entire cultural and spiritual landscape of the 13th century.
Let's quickly map out this timeline because it is a wildly fast trajectory. Born around 1181 or 1182 to a super wealthy family in Assisi, his life gets completely upended by a profound conversion experience around 1205. Just 5 years later, he is founding a global spiritual movement, and by 1226, he passes away. That is a remarkably condensed timeline for a guy whose ideas are literally still shaping our world 8 centuries later.
Part 1. The Wealthy Youth of Assisi. A life of extreme privilege.
So, we start our journey in the beautiful, stony city of Assisi. Imagine this. A young man, originally named Giovanni, later known as Francesco, is born into just immense wealth. We're talking a world completely insulated by money and status. As the heir to a rich fabric merchant, he was all about chasing worldly excess and the glory of war. But his ultimate destination? The exact opposite. He ended up embracing absolute poverty, begging on the streets, and trading all those fine silks for a rough, unadorned tunic. The sensory contrast here couldn't possibly be more extreme.
Part 2. The Conversion at San Damiano, a radical renunciation.
Now, this wasn't just some overnight change. To actually separate himself from his father's massive wealth, Francis did something completely unthinkable for the 13th century. He publicly rejected his inheritance by literally stripping off his fine clothes right in the Assisi town square, handing them back to his father. He was shedding his past, both physically and symbolically, in front of the whole town, basically making absolutely sure there was no turning back from this new path. So what was the actual spark for this dramatic shift? Historical tradition tells us it happened at the crumbling church of San Damiano. While praying before a wooden crucifix, Francis reportedly heard these exact words, "Go and repair my house." Now initially, he took this very literally. He started physically rebuilding the ruined stone church. But as our sources reveal, this message would eventually spark a lifelong mission to rebuild the spiritual foundations of his entire era.
Part 3. The Foundation of the Order. Building a global movement.
From rebuilding literal stone walls, Francis's mission suddenly expanded, which meant he had to go directly to Rome and face the immense power of the Vatican. In 1210, Francis sought official recognition from Pope Innocent III. Now, historical accounts note that the Pope was highly hesitant at first. I mean, here's this ragged guy asking for approval. But the narrative says the Pope was swayed by a really vivid prophetic dream. He dreamt of a small, poor man single-handedly holding up the collapsing Basilica of St. John Lateran. Recognizing Francis as that man, the Pope granted oral approval. And just like that, the Franciscan order was officially born.
What's really fascinating here is how Francis visually communicated his new mission. He completely ditched his father's luxurious imported fabrics and adopted the Tau cross instead. That's an ancient symbol of healing drawn directly from the biblical book of Ezekiel. And on his simple cord belt, he tied 3 knots. These weren't just for show. They grounded his followers in their core vows: chastity, obedience, and absolute poverty.
Part 4. Nature and the Creche, a revolutionary connection.
As we move away from the busy cities and into the wilderness, particularly the Eremo delle Carceri, we uncover his truly groundbreaking relationship with the natural world. This is where Francis really separated himself from the thinking of his time. While everyone else saw nature simply as a resource to be used, Francis was out there preaching to the birds and writing the beautiful Canticle of the Sun.
The historical texts show this incredibly unique, almost modern ecological mindset. He viewed the sun, the wind, the moon, and the animals not just as creations, but as his direct brothers and sisters. Honestly, long before the word even existed, Francis was planting the philosophical roots of environmentalism.
He also had this absolute genius for visual communication. In 1223, in the town of Greccio, Francis wanted to make the biblical prophecy of Isaiah totally accessible to everyday people. So he took these brilliant steps, he gathered a real ox and donkey, he built a physical manger inside a cave, and he used a simple cloth doll to represent Jesus. Bam! He created the world's very first live nativity scene. It was this hands-on, living visual lesson that literally forever changed how the entire world celebrates Christmas.
Part 5. The Mystery of the Stigmata. The Ultimate Connection at La Verna.
Our journey reaches its mystical climax high up in the isolated, foggy mountains of Tuscany at Mount La Verna. Here, Francis experienced something that completely cemented his legacy. The text we are drawing from, specifically the very powerful account from his first biographer, St. Bonaventure, described an intense spiritual vision. While deep in meditation, Francis reportedly saw a crucified seraphim with 6 wings of fire. Bonaventure's account tells us that when the vision faded, it left an inextinguishable flame in his soul and the physical marks of the crucifixion, the stigmata, on his own body, marks he humbly carried until his dying day.
Part 6. A Legacy of Words. The Enduring Franciscan Library. Let's step back from the physical pilgrimage for a second. Francis's legacy isn't just some myth passed down through a game of telephone, it is incredibly well documented. As detailed in the historical archives, we actually have his tangible rules, his letters to global leaders, spiritual admonitions, canticles, and final testaments. These documents have remarkably survived for 8 centuries. We can literally read the exact thoughts of a man who changed the world.
And you know, that legacy absolutely continues to shape our modern reality. Since the 13th century, Franciscans have been the official custodians of sacred sites in the Holy Land. But perhaps the most prominent modern connection happened in 2013. That's when a newly elected pope looked back at this radical saint of the poor and the environment and for the very first time in history, adopted the name Pope Francis. The echo of Assisi is for sure still ringing loudly today.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We've seen the condensed timeline, the historical text, the absolute shocking renunciation of wealth. Think about it. If a single merchant's son, stepping out of a life of total privilege, could spark an 800-year legacy of peace, profound humility, and environmentalism, what radical changes can we make in our own lives today to leave our own light upon the world? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.